Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to go over what the betting markets are telling us about the odds of these different candidates to go on and win the Democratic nomination are telling us in the big shifting that we've gotten after the Iowa caucus. Now, it's still inconceivable, but we're still not to 100% of the precincts reporting yet in those Iowa caucuses. We're almost there, getting up to around 97% reported, and it's been pretty much the case throughout this process where Sanders has had a pretty sizable lead over Pete Buttigieg on the first round, the first choice of the individuals that showed up for these caucuses, but then during the realignment, Pete Buttigieg was able to close that gap, a lot of that hinging on the fact that more of the centrist moderate candidates like Klobuchar or Biden in a number of instances weren't able to reach that 15 percentage point threshold, which gave Pete Buttigieg a bit of a boost. So then in the final alignment, Sanders still has had a consistent lead over Buttigieg throughout all of these numbers that have been reported. But then the change has been with the state delegate equivalents where Pete Buttigieg has had an edge over Sanders. But as we've gotten closer and closer to getting 100% of the precincts reporting, Sanders has shrunk that state delegate equivalent gap. And just for whatever reason, the votes that were overwhelmingly going towards Sanders have just taken longer to count and be tabulated. For instance, these satellite caucuses have been a big boost to him closing that gap with Mayor Pete. And whenever we do get that 100% result, of course, I will update you guys on exactly what happens and how many pledged delegates that each of these candidates end up receiving. But in the meantime, I wanted to go over what the betting markets have been telling us because it is very fascinating. So over here from Real Clear Politics, this is the average of all of these different betting markets, and we can see quite a bit of shifting around over the past few weeks, but also just after the Iowa caucus. So we can see that Biden was relatively competitive here with Bernie Sanders. After Sanders had his surge throughout the month of January, he was doing a lot better in the polls, so his odds were getting quite a bit better in terms of his chances to go on and win. But then we get the Iowa caucus, and Joe Biden absolutely falls off a cliff where he's actually even below Mike Bloomberg now in terms of the best chance of the centrists to go on and win. So he's down there at 18.3%, where you see Sanders right now is at about 37.8% to win the nomination, whereas Bloomberg actually a little bit past Biden now. Again, these are just numbers that are given from the betting markets in terms of their estimations to go on and win this thing, and a lot of that is built off of where the betting public is putting their money on these different candidates. But we also see Pete Buttigieg has taken a bit of a step up where he was kind of hovering around a 5% chance, but then after Iowa, he's up to a 16% chance. But if we get this situation where Sanders actually surpasses Pete Buttigieg and ends up winning in terms of the state delegate equivalents, then I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see Mayor Pete take a little bit of a step back with these numbers, but still certainly a boost from him. And what's interesting to see how things have shifted over the course of time. Back during October, you can see that the odds had Elizabeth Warren over a 50% chance to win, and just how dramatically she's fallen off since then, where now she's at about a 7.5% chance to go on and win the nomination. And then also taking a look at the updated numbers from 538 and their statistical model, and Sanders has gotten a big boost where now he's about a 50-50 chance to go on and win this thing. They have him up at 49%. They put a lot of weight certainly on what the Iowa caucus result was, but also the fact that his top competitor, Joe Biden, did so poorly in Iowa that he fell back here to just a 1 in 6 chance, or about 17% in their model, whereas no one winning by the time we get to the convention has also improved their odds to about 23 percentage points. Then you have Warren there at about 1 in 12, and Pete Buttigieg down at about 1 in 30. So there was a lot of hype surrounding Mayor Pete after it looked like he might be able to go on to win the state delegate equivalents, and we've been seeing that narrative in the media over the past few days with just the constantly that Pete Buttigieg is leading or winning in Iowa, even though we haven't been getting the full results up to this point. So that boosted him up. But when you look at this big picture for Pete Buttigieg, sure, he can do well in Iowa. Maybe he does decent in New Hampshire, but by and large, his national numbers are still very low, and he's having a hard time picking up support from minority voters, which are a very important block in a Democratic primary. So in a more national sense, he's still likely to have a tough time kind of building the coalition needed to seriously contend and try to go on and win this nomination. And we can see 538's model over time. They launched their forecast here back in the earlier portion of January, where Biden was their best odds-on candidate to go on and win at that point in time, which was clearly in line with what the data was saying. But we can see this big surge here from Bernie Sanders, especially since the Iowa caucus, where he's now almost up to a 50% chance in their model to go on and win this thing. Now, these forecasts and odds can definitely change very quickly. So in the coming results, now New Hampshire, for instance, likely to be positive for Bernie Sanders. So if he goes on and wins that one by a decent margin, maybe he gets another boost up. But if you get somebody like a Joe Biden or a Pete Buttigieg who's able to surprise in some of these upcoming states, then they might be able to close that gap with Bernie Sanders. This is a very fluid situation, and it's just a snapshot in time in terms of what people are figuring and what the perception is of these candidates to go on and have success to go on and win this nomination. So some really interesting stuff, how the odds have shifted around so drastically since the Iowa caucus, and a lot of this just has to do with the Sanders' success in Iowa and how poorly his top competitor, Joe Biden, did, finishing in a distant fourth place, which has really hurt his odds at potentially going on and winning this thing. But this can all change. We'll see how that happens as we move our way through primary season. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Consider subscribing for more, and I hope to see you back here for my next video, which I hope is a situation where we get full results from Iowa, and I can actually update my pledged delegate tracker with all of the pledged delegates out of Iowa just to see how that race ended up playing out. So thanks again, and we'll see you back here next time.